Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy. It's Monday, and I got news for you. I'm not ready for the week. Mike and I just got on the line together a few minutes ago and said, what do you want to talk about this week? And we both looked at each other and like, huh? We're supposed to talk about something? So here we are. I think it's going to be day 47, but I've lost track, of United States of America versus Joe Biggs. And I feel like I'm walking into the Madame Tussauds House of Horrors. You know, I don't recognize what's going on in the courtroom right now. And obviously I need to be careful so as not to avoid rules against prejudicial, extrajudicial commentary during trial. So let me just try to call it neutrally. At the end of last week, an FBI agent was on the stand, and it came to light that the government had passed along files to the defense that the defense shouldn't have had. These files involved 5 categories of documents. An email suggesting that an FBI agent had destroyed 328 pieces of evidence in the command of her or supervisor. Second, that attorney-client communications between one of the defense and counsel and the defendants had been listened to by the government. And third, at fourth and fifth, the commentary on evidence. Well, third, okay, let me be specific. Third, that somebody had requested that their name be taken off a report involving confidential human sources. Fourth, that there was some internal debate about the viability of the conspiracy charges, and fifth, some commentary on a piece of evidence in this case. And so the government, when a co-counsel of mine sought to cross-examine the FBI agent on this, the government objected as beyond the scope of direct examination, and also questioning whether we had inadvertently received documents that we shouldn't have, that may or may not have been classified. So we all agreed to go to our corners for the weekend, the government to reassess things and to file a motion. And so they did, and they filed a pleading yesterday. I read Politico's report on it, and you'll see it posted there by Kyle Cheney. Cheney does a good job, I think, reporting on the metes and bounds of the conflict. And as we come into Monday, it looks sort of like this. Any communications between Zachary Rell and his lawyer were not privileged because they went via a prison communication network. Mr. Rell is being held as a pretrial detainee. To participate on that network, a participant had to acknowledge that the communications were coming from a correctional facility, and in this instance, they were not confidential. If a lawyer wanted to talk to his client confidentially, they could use an alternative means and didn't do so. So there may not be any privilege at all. Second, as to the destroyed evidence, the claim is that it's not evidence involving this case at all, but rather it was communication from one agent to the agent on the stand that she was destroying evidence in a case that was some 20 years old and unrelated to this case. As to the claim of removing a name from a report involving a confidential human source, again, no indication it has anything to do with this case. The person who wanted their name removed was a supervisor in another case. And as to the fourth and fifth items involving the viability of the conspiracy claim in this case and commentary on a certain piece of evidence, that was beyond the scope of the direct examination of the agent in question. And the government takes the position that if the defense wants to try to produce evidence of that, it can do so in its case in chief. That's the state of play, though. In the position of the parties, Mr. Reel, his lawyer filed a motion to dismiss over the weekend. As to Mr. Pizzola, his lawyer filed a motion to dismiss for appointment of a special master, for appointment of special counsel, and there have been other filings as well. I'm looking at this thinking, oh man, I don't know that, I don't know that Mr. Biggs has a dog in this fight, to be honest with you. I mean, I look at the state of pleadings. I look at, in particular, at the commentary that has been raised about this in the press. You know, Alex Jones is all over it. Tim Pool's all over it. Julie Kelly's all over it. Tucker Carlson's all over it. There is now a whole narrative.
Yeah, I was going to say, Norm, they're all over something. I don't know that we agree on them being all over it.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that there, yeah, an effort. It's one of these cases where there, you know, I mean, I can understand suspicion of the government. I have it. We've pled not. Mr. Biggs has pled not guilty in this case. We'll soon give closing arguments, and we will tell the jury why we think the government has failed in its proof. However, you know, what I'm not going to say is it was all a government setup and Nancy Pelosi's guilty and she did it. That's just not a defense in this case. And so, you know, I feel the public is being poorly served. We've got a comment. How should the public feel when the Attorney General of the U.S., the top cop, comes out and lies directly to the American people by saying 5 officers were killed, I guess, you know, this is the claim, you know, as a result of J6. You know, I think people need to just step back and not litigate every sentence. You know, I know that Garland said 5 officers were killed, and in fact, no officer died on January 6th. One officer suffered some sort of health event the day after Officer Sicknick and died shortly thereafter. There's video of him alive and walking on Capitol grounds that day. Several officers killed themselves. It is sloppy speech to say that these officers died as a result of January 6th. Okay, so Garland overstated his case, but you can also overstate your case. And if I've learned one thing as a trial lawyer, and maybe I haven't learned anything, but if I've learned one thing, it is that the proof of facts is difficult. And there's a reason that the Proud Boys case has gone on now into its 46th or 47th day. And the reason for that is we have competing perspectives on the meaning of events that are observed in some instances and inferred in others, that is, states of mind. And so I think that people are awfully quick to retreat to their partisan corners in this case and make mountains out of molehills. And I'm beginning to think that the disclosures with respect to the FBI agent last week looked dramatic and had the potential to be dramatic, but in the end are unlikely to be that significant. And I suspect that what Judge Kelly will rule today is that questions involving the attorney-client privilege are largely moot. He'll deny the motion to dismiss. Questions involving destruction of evidence are irrelevant because they don't pertain to this case. Questions involving the agency evaluation of evidence in this case are likely to be put off to the defense case in chief, although we will press for the right to question her about it now. But in the end, you know, Tucker Carlson, House Republicans, Julie Kelly, the chattering class of commentators who are watching this trial from afar or reading its transcripts or reading reports about it, they're just not doing a service to the American people or doing justice to this case.
I think it's a little worse than that. And I know I'm interrupting you, Norm, but I think it's
somebody's got to.
Well, look, I think that it's a little worse than what you're describing with Tim Pool, with Tucker Carlson, with even Alex. You know, the inability or the refusal or the lack of interest in understanding the narrow legal issue that's over which a lot of ink is being spilled is going to lead to missed expectations and mismanagement of expectations of those respective audiences on this issue in particular. This is something that's really this is an impassioned debate. People have their opinions. We talk about that a lot, and it should not be. There should be no misunderstanding of as to what side of the line you and I stand on, respectively. I think we have a shared suspicion of authority. Period. Which drives the inquiries that we make on this stream and this show. But for purposes of this issue, with people at the same time as the QAnon shaman is making headlines everywhere, you know, he's already entered into a plea agreement, right? He's already given away his rights to an appeal on this issue. The fact that he knew that he had done certain things, he was aware of everything that he was involved in that day, and he made the decision not to stand on his own and launch a legal defense. Now, maybe that's an issue of resources, maybe it's something else. But the fact of the matter is the situation in the U.S. v. Biggs et al. Trial with respect to this spill and what's going on with QAnon shaman and, you know, the apparent exculpatory events captured on video are not the same thing. They're in no way related as it relates to an analysis of the issue. And what I'm worried about, Norm, is that these other networks are not deferring their viewers, I'm not saying to us, but to any resource where they could wrap their head around the narrow legal issue being litigated, because absent that, it's going to look like something substantially more and something that only serves as confirmation bias that the federal government is totally captured, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I think that's true. But, you know, I mean, I'm listening to you and I'm chuckling because as we were trying to debate the meaning of all of this on Thursday morning, one of the prosecutors referred to a certain page of transcript, referred to the agent's testimony. And as memory serves, I think the prosecutor said, "Judge, I'd refer you to page 12,752 of the trial transcript." And I'm like, yeah, that says it all. Page 12,752, and we're not done yet. You know, trials are very fact intensive, very difficult ordeals. And arriving at the truth of what happened on January 6th is more difficult than most trials. With respect to the QAnon shaman, you know, it's easy to look at pictures of him walking through the hallways of Congress and say, hey, you know, he was on a guided tour. Look at how peaceful that is. But then there are other videos that show him entering the building through a broken window. And, you know, does that look like a peaceful entry? And so I think people have an opportunity to pick and choose pieces of evidence they want to give a narrative that serves their interest. But in an adversarial system where both sides have an opportunity to present all the evidence, jurors are then required rather to make a decision about events that are far more significant than a soundbite. So, you know, we're in it to win it in the Biggs trial. I think we can win this trial without advancing the theory that this is a massive government cover-up or that Nancy
and that's
Pelosi
the way that it should be. Yeah, ultimately, it's like, you know, the refs don't lose the game kind of thing. And I understand the context, and I'm trying not to be too tone deaf with what I'm saying, but ultimately, it doesn't benefit within the Biggs camp to abide these sort of easy button answers, right? That it's the deck is stacked. You know, that doesn't help the defendants with counselors that would abide that kind of stuff. Lawyer Will ask a question. He says, "Is Biggs on any of the new footage?"
There is no new footage, first of all. I mean, you know, that this is one of these narratives that has spun out. I mean, I saw QAnon shaman say that he hadn't seen the videos. I don't know if he didn't look in his discovery package, but I'm not aware that the government has withheld footage from the defendants that is relevant to their cases. We were given some 14,000 hours worth of footage that was from CCTV and body cam videos of the defendants and the related conduct. There were 20-some thousand other hours of footage, but these were largely from cameras pointed away from the building or for times irrelevant to the proceedings.
Well, there's also Elon Musk retweeting the video of him telling a large contingency of the crowd to go home, right? He had the megaphone. He was trying to, you know, put the megaphone to his phone so that they could hear Donald Trump advising everybody to go home. And in the minds of people watching, and any reasonable person would say, it's unfortunate that he's spending however long it is behind bars for participation in whatever it is, even if it was a violation of federal law at a technical level. You know, I have sympathy for that, but ultimately those two things don't help one another, right? What's going on over here doesn't touch that.
So, you know, Lawyer Will, I'm not sure, you know, that there is new footage. I think that Tucker was given access to things, to material. He publicized some, but not all. And I'm not sure what, in the context of an 8-minute broadcast, however long that segment was, you know, how you can capture the complexity of events in that time. When at trial, you know, we're in the 47th day. We probably got 3 weeks to go, maybe another 4. And all the evidence still isn't in yet. So maybe this trial just stands for the proposition that reality is complex, decision making is simple, and when it comes to drawing partisan lines, people make ideological decisions that reflect their biases, confirmation bias, as you mentioned, Mike, and that, those who are inclined to distrust the government find it easy to believe the narrative that the government has somehow followed the nest here and erred. Those who believe the government will blame the protesters. The larger question is, what happened to a shared sense of what's reasonable? From my perspective, the most distressing thing about the January 6 trials is how quickly this becomes inflamed into competing and impassioned partisan narratives where both sides seem unwilling to listen to one another. And so we will not be adopting a partisan narrative in the J6 case. We're going to hold the government to its standard, to the standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt of the charges the government has sought to bring, and we will soon give closing arguments on why we think it will fail in that effort and why it should. As to I see Justin says Murdoch shut Tucker down. Maybe he should have in this instance. I think Tucker got out over his skis, and that's too bad. Hey, so I've got a confession to make. I figured out how to use Netflix over the weekend. That's yeah. I mean, and you guys are thinking, man, I need a different podcast in the morning if that's news. And I watched those of you who are interested in the Alex Murdoch case. There's a 3-episode long series on the Murdoch case that was produced prior to the trial. Wow, I couldn't keep my eyes off it. I thought, wait, don't I get enough crime during the week? And it looks like the Murdoch family was entirely lawless. I didn't realize that, Mr. Murdoch, who you'd realize comes from a long line of South Carolina lawyers, the fourth in a generation, reaching back a century to control basically the county, that Hampton County that he lived in Low Country there in South Carolina. He's been convicted of murdering his wife and son. And these just seem to be the tip of the iceberg, an iceberg that goes far deeper than I realized, not just relating to theft from his law firm and clients, but to the suspicious death of his housekeeper. He apparently took out an insurance policy on her, and then a month later she ends up dead on the front steps of his home as a result of a slip and fall, buried without an autopsy, mind you. He steps in manfully to represent the estate, settles the claim at the policy limit, and then her decedents, her children, receive nothing, her survivors rather, receive nothing. He pockets all of the money, and they read about it in the press. Her body is the housekeeper's body is being exhumed to see whether there were signs of foul play there. And then there's more. Years earlier, a young man was found dead in the middle of a road, and there are suspicions that young man may have been involved in a relationship with one of Mr. Murdoch's sons, and maybe the Murdochs killed him to silence him and to prevent scandal. And so take a look at if you're interested in the Alex Murdoch murder case and wondering what happened there, watch that 3-part series and you'll have even more questions. I started thinking, man, where's Joseph Conrad in the Heart of Darkness when you need him? I've never been a Faulkner fan, but I found myself over the weekend thinking maybe I need to get myself to a bookstore and take a look at Faulkner's portrayal of darkness in the Deep South, because it seems to have found a home in the Murdoch family.
Well, what's astounding to me, Tom, is that now that you've learned Netflix, I'm forced to reflect on the fact that we've already hosted Dean Strang on this show, and he is of Making a Murderer fame. You didn't even get to catch that fame and that cultural moment of Making a Murderer. So, just interesting to me that here we are. You have such tight binds in the legal profession, and we can reach into folds such as the Rittenhouse attorney Mark Richards. Right. And then we can talk to, Dean Strang, who was, within that same cultural moment where people started getting interested in these documentaries on Netflix. And you have heard nothing about the Murdoch trial because of this, because you just haven't been on there. This has been something.
Well, but I need to correct the record. This is a confession about my shortcomings. I mean, no married man is bound only by what he can do. I have access to superior resources in the form of my infinitely patient wife, who shall go unnamed for the sake of her sense of security and well-being. But she is the manager of all of our our video stuff, and so we watched Making of a Murderer, and she is the manager or the manageress of our passwords and our digital accounts. I'm just stuck here alone in DC, on my 14th week or whatever it is of trial here, and I was forced to learn how to use Netflix on my own, which really wasn't that big an ordeal. My wife had to airlift me some Xanax so that she could give me the passwords and then patiently wait for me to try to enter them in the system while I was fumbling, thinking ABC, NBC, CBS. I remember when television was 3 channels. What is all this stuff? But I was able to do it, and I've opened up a whole new world of possibilities. Hey, so I gotta say, Mike.
One second here. I want to recognize a few people in the chat. It's pretty active this morning. Lawyer Will's here. Liberty Warriors here. Gma Park says, good morning. Best of luck in the trial this week, Norm. Definitely some interesting developments. Sparkly Reese is here. I think I already said Lawyer Will, Lawyer Will, Lawyer Will.
Lawyer Will.
T-Girl, BTL, and of course, Justin Carta over on YouTube. So for those of you who have joined via Rumble, you know that StreamYard doesn't allow us to show the YouTube chats or the Rumble chats on the screen here, but an interesting feature if you do want to potentially have your name and or question represented here on the screen as we do AMAs or we just go through these normal topics, consider joining via YouTube and we'll be able to actually broadcast your question directly here in the stream.
And we can do things like admire Mike's prescience and forethought. You nailed Memphis, it turns out.
Yeah, speaking of complex realities, right? So Washington Post, and you sent me this article, so this isn't me scratching my own back. Although
no, it's me scratching your back. A little lower? Okay. A little lower? I'm not going any lower. I'm married. No.
Well, we're going to bring up an article from the Washington Post, and of course, we don't have a subscription there. We're going to hawk remove paywall until remove paywall decides they want to sponsor Law and Legitimacy. So you can find this on the Washington Post. It was in yesterday's edition, but the title says Memphis Police Academy cut corners while scrambling to hire, officers say. And Robert Klemko does a deep dive on the history of Memphis Police Department, at least since around 2013, 2014, what their protocols were for hiring, for training, for ongoing fitness standards, and in terms of credentialing to even join the police academy, these various things. When we talked about what was going on with the Nichols situation, and in particular, Norm, when we talked about what was happening as we observed the video, I think I used the phrase, it felt very pickup basketball-esque, right?
Yeah.
It felt like the officers who were together that evening, beating the hell out of Tyree Nichols. It felt as though they were undisciplined. It felt as though they were communicating in a way that was not subject to some sort of training manual. And it felt inexperienced and raw. And it appears as though I'm not, I don't attribute myself any sort of clairvoyance, but that's just obvious. And for those watching and listening, I grew up with law enforcement sort of in the periphery of my life on both sides of my family, father and mother's side. I grew up knowing.
No. What he's trying to say is when he didn't do his homework, his mother used to walk up to him and say, assume the position. And he'd put his hands on the wall and his father would pat him down while the mother stood by with guns drawn saying, don't resist. Stop resisting. Stop resisting. Excuse me.
Well, and what that really means is that I think, it was difficult for me, like I said, Norm, to you, it is some time ago during law school to make it through criminal procedure because it was the one doctrinal course that I had a lot of difficulty removing my what I brought to the classroom from outside experience and removing that as a reality from the analysis that just seemed to kind of live only on the paper when it came to such things as a Terry stop or a Fourth Amendment search and frisk, those sorts of things. Anyway, what appears to be the case here is exactly what we've been talking about and exactly what I've been talking about within the beverage alcohol framework, which is, the state of policing today is that there is a desperate need for officers. And as a demand for officers increases, the training standards must inevitably go down in order to bring them into the fold. And what's happened with the Memphis Police Department in particular, this Washington Post article dives in and talks a lot about it. Now, I think that one thing that should be striking to most people, because there's only a passing reference made in this article, Norm, is to the academy training, and in particular the firearms training. This stuff has been going on for well over a decade, right? These quotas that police and law enforcement administrators have tried to enforce, and what that does is it puts an additional stress on two areas of training. One is handling a car, right? Doing the driving school, and the other is handling a firearm, making it through firearms training. There are, I have so many anecdotal stories because of where I'm positioned, of these sort of people going through academies who would fail out only to show up in the next academy or the academy after that because they could not get a handle on firearms training. They were failing out, but because they hit certain affirmative action boxes, administration was forcing them back into the program. There is a non-zero number of these people who are out policing right now. And I'm not saying that these are the types of people that we saw in the Nichols video, but I am saying that that is emblematic of how desperate this situation is the country over.
Well, I think it's getting more desperate. I mean, if you look, apparently the number of retirees in the New York City Police Department is at a record high this year. Cops are bailing out. The pressures they're under on the street to respond to ongoing chaos in a way that respects community sensitivities makes people think, hey, why would I want to do this line of work, and let me out? And it's a sad world for policing right now. I think in the character and fitness thing, and I don't mean physical fitness, but I mean, characterological moral fitness is an even more significant problem. Police officers have enormous discretion on whether to take a person into custody, whether to engage at all, how much force to use in an encounter that's gone bad. And if you've got some bad apples in there, you're going to get some funky taste in cider. And it may be that we've got more bad apples in the barrel because the need for police is real. The situations that we place them in are difficult, but we're not getting the best candidates for office right now for any of a number of reasons.
Well, and I'm comfortable with this story, Norm, because I make no bones about my own legal education. My law school doesn't exist anymore, but my law school doesn't exist anymore because they were playing a very vulture-like game with federal funding for student loans, right? And what's going on here, the article goes on to say it's not sure if this is a pattern that's being seen in other places. That's total BS. We know that this is happening in every major municipality in the country. And I bring up the law school bit to say there are recruits and people going through law enforcement training who are every bit as talented and will have extremely competent, successful careers, but the bottom is falling out.
Okay.
Right? That is, the bottom has fallen out in training for law enforcement, and the public needs to be aware of that. That seems to me to be the real appreciable danger.
While we're talking about the bottom falling out, just a couple minutes left. I want to turn everybody's attention to an article in today's Newsweek. It's called "Return to the Humanities to Save America." It's an essay by John Burtka, Burtka. John Burtka, Newsweek, "Return to the Humanities to Save America." He makes a simple point, and that is that if you want to talk about inspiring people to have good judgment, to have a collective sense of common norms, to avoid making extreme decisions in the face of difficult circumstances, maybe you need to train them better, and maybe they need to have a broader vision of what human possibility is than what they just read in yesterday's tweets or what got them all fired up in the meme warfare of yesterday. He notes that a piece in the New Yorker talked about a collapse in the number of students studying English, history, and philosophy. Only 7% of this year's Harvard freshmen plan to major in the humanities. And he notes that this is widespread across all universities. John Henry Newman long praised philosophical habit of mind that arises from the study of great books and inculcates virtues like freedom, equitableness, calmness, moderation, and wisdom. These are virtues that matter a lot. I think they're virtues that we prize in our interactions with one another. We don't want somebody going from 0 to 60, from frustration to rage, the minute someone says no to them. We want people to understand competing points of view, to be able to reason together, to understand norms of discourse that transcend their interest. And the best place to get that, I think, is an exposure to great books. So just take a look at the essay. Again, it's in today's Newsweek, and it's called, I have to pick up my phone, Return to the Humanities to Save America. And then ask yourself the following: what good book are you going to read this month to do your part to save our culture?
Yeah, I would say, Norm, that because I graduated with a meaningless psychology degree, and from undergrad, I was part of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, or CHAS, at NC State, and definitely a very robust school over there. But the humanities, as far as my experiences, has been totally corrupted by more of the postmodern
Oh, yeah.
materialist writers, definitely the nihilistic writers, and that is sort of a cultural force, is what dominates the lens in the humanities schools. So I don't know that, I took English literature courses and different things, but those who dominate are more the Tolstoys and the Kafkas and those types. Right.
And Homer's Odyssey, that's the best book. If here's my reading suggestion for those of you wanting to make a stand against the collapse of Western civilization: go out and buy a Bible, and go out and buy a copy of Homer's Odyssey, and then just read through them at your leisure. I mean, the book of Genesis remains one of the most astounding accounts of human origins that I've ever encountered. I've visited the Museum of the Bible while down here in DC, and picked up a new Bible while I was down here, just to kind of have it to noodle with in the evening, or look to the Psalms as balm for your soul, or to the remarkable story of God's love for man as expressed in the career, crucifixion, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So there you have it, folks. We've talked our way through another half an hour of your lives, and of course I'm a little leisurely now because we just got a note from the court just came in. We're going to be starting an hour later this morning. USA versus Biggs. I think that means the judge is reading all the pleadings that got filed over the weekend, and will come in this morning for more endless debate about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. So there it is.
Well, thank you all for joining us again on this nice Monday morning in mid-March. We will be back tomorrow morning, 7:45 a.m. Please put a thumbs up on this video, subscribe on YouTube and/or Rumble. Maybe do both, maybe like on both, double the trouble. And then if you are on Twitter, I do encourage you to follow us at Pattis Podcast. We're very interactive with followers and non-followers, for that matter, Norm, over there. So looking forward to seeing you in the morning, Norm, and good luck with this startup week.
Yeah, well, it is what it is. Another week, another week. Freedom lover, thanks for checking in with us on YouTube. We'll see you all tomorrow morning. Thanks for listening to Law and Legitimacy.
See you, Norm.